Welcome again to all of you all who are here. I now blessedly turn it over to Dr. Neese.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, dear sister. I appreciate it, and it was not as nearly as long as it could have been, so that's a blessing in and of itself. I'm so happy to be here today to join all of you in this really special conversation about our ordinary, extraordinary African-American women who are panelists here today. Our conversation today is going to be over a variety of subjects, and I hope we can all put on our hats as knowledge consumers, because that's what we are. This is about consuming knowledge from the perspectives and viewpoints of others while we're reflecting on our shared experiences as Black women. So I start a lot of my little workshops and seminars really just starting with a basic question. You know, given all of the framework of the things that are going on today, of course, the COVID, the racial inequities that have been so predominant, just so many things, the politics that continue to go on, just a lot of stuff. So I'd like to just start with asking, you know, how are you doing? Just how are you? Gladys? We're gonna need to unmute her.
I can't. She has to do it herself.
There we go. Am I unmuted?
Yes.
I said on any given day, I'm okay. I was just thinking as you were asking, as you were talking, how the baggage I carry with me affects my behavior. And I walk every day. And I grew up where we had to step off the sidewalk when a white approached. And I find myself, playing with, do I get off the sidewalk for this joker? Or do I stay on the sidewalk? And then I reflect back on, that's baggage that I'm carrying from a time long ago. And I'm trying to learn to deal with that baggage that I'm carrying from a time long ago. I'm doing okay.
Okay. Somebody else. Tara, how are you doing today?
Unmute.
Tara, you need to unmute.
How about that?
There you go.
I'm doing well today, and this year has really taken a toll on me because the pandemic made me very sad and frightened. And so this has been a really good thing for me because it helped me to feel good about who we are. And I think I'm surviving because of the faith that I have, and most importantly, my friends who have helped me through this past year. And that's one of the reasons why I came out of retirement. So I had to be around other people. And so because of my faith and my friends, I'm doing well.
Wonderful. Somebody else, Miss Vina. She's distracted, I can tell. June, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine today. This has been a special week. I just celebrated a 60th college reunion from Spelman, and we've been doing it virtually since Wednesday. And so I have been surrounded by old, very good memories these last few days. I've had 2 Zoom meetings with my classmates from the class of 61, the last one being yesterday. And so I feel loved and appreciated right now, totally. And then to add this on today, that's, like icing on the cake for me. Although I'm mentally tired and exhausted from all the interaction that I'm not accustomed to, that I've had the last few days, but it has been good. The pandemic has not bothered me very much. My life was a quiet, mostly stay-at-home life anyway, and so being forced to not do a few things didn't bother me or my husband. And luckily, I have a husband, so I've got somebody I can talk to. He and I like each other, so we like to argue with each other as well. We are both first children, and both think that we need to be in charge of everything that goes on in this house. And so that always keeps me interesting. So I think pretty well I'm doing well. A few weeks ago, I was beginning to feel down, but after the reunion and today, I think it's given me a big uplift. Thank you.
Excellent. Wonderful to hear. Anyone else? Marilyn?
Oh, I would say that it goes day by day in terms of my feelings and emotions. I'm heavily engaged in what's going on in our country, the State of the Union, so to speak. And I'm just at a point where I'm not interested in stepping off the sidewalk for a white person, but I personally would like to knock the hell out of them if they're coming toward me. So basically, that's how. And I know that may be, almost heredity. I mean, a horrible thing rather to say as a pastor, but being engaged in the congregation that's basically a predominantly white and having experienced racism, the attempt to be racist and Christian at the same time, and then to see what's going on, especially the attacks against Sister Stacey Abrams and all of the other women and all of the other people who are working so diligently to not take us back to Jim Crow era, and not take us back to the places where our sitting representatives would like to have us go back to. And then I don't know if it's even a question of going back to, but as I've been reading Cast by Isabel Wilkerson and all of those other things, I'm wondering, has it really ever changed? And how can I devote the rest of my life to doing something about the problems that are here in this country? I'm being as outspoken and as demanding, as making as much good trouble as I possibly can, just to keep the record straight and to not live in the life of lies and delusion about how great America is. It is not, in my opinion, based on its representation of itself constitutionally and all of those other things. I'm not discounting the stories that we share and have in common and that represent who we are. But basically, overall, that's what I'm talking about, the State of the Union. And so that's what I get crazy about. And I have to calm myself down and bring myself back to, oh, I love my grandson and I love my grandchildren. And my grandson just graduated from college and all of those things to keep my feet on the ground.
Wonderful. Thank you. Anyone else want to share with us how you're doing today? Michelle.
Well, JC also has her hand up.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Ooh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. My answer to that question is, I feel like I'm okay because I have to be okay. And as long as I have breath in my body, that I have to be okay. I have to make it okay. I have to sometimes let go and let be. And I have a daily, regular self-care routine that I don't let up on. I mean, that's just my regular life. And then I just have maintained it and maybe even amped it up during this time. I make sure that I stay connected with my tribe, my family and my friends that are important to me. And I try to, live my life as normal as I can. I'm kind of like June. I was never, I have to go everywhere with everybody anyway. So it has not been that extreme for me, but I'm just kind of making my life. And I think it's important when we talk about self-care. Part of it is to rest from the media and all that stuff that you're hearing that's coming at you, because that can make you depressed. It can make you more stressed. I stay connected. I know what's going on. I know what's happening, but I don't overwhelm myself and overconsume myself with that. I don't make it a daily, nutritional thing to consume the media. So that's how I make it day to day.
Wonderful. JC, you had a comment.
I had a comment as well. I think that what Michelle was saying is true. You can't stay connected to the media because they're selling fear. They're constantly selling fear. And so I have a problem with stress. There's the fake stress, and then there's the real stress. Here in Metro Atlanta, we had a gas problem. So there's stress. Where are you going to get gas from? How are you going to get around? How are you going to get the things you need for your loved ones? So I find that the stress, it's been protracted now for more than a year, is tremendous from one thing to another. So managing that stress, I think, is very important for all of us to handle it however we find is healthy. But stress, that's the silent killer.
Absolutely. And I appreciate your comment about both of the other comments that had to do with self-care. And I really actually wanted to delve into that a little bit. I do, most of the questions, most of the topics that we're going to be covering, are things about what's going on in America, the state of America, but more particularly the state of Black women in America. And one of the things that I know is true is that, as Black women, we tend to sometimes overlook those stressors, the stressors that you're talking about. We tend to, not so much overlook, sometimes we just put them down. We just bury those stressors. So what other kinds of ways do you utilize, do you practice self-care? And what other suggestions can you give to this panel, to all the participants, about how do we recover from the stressors? Some of the research shows that Black women on the whole are, even when we talk about losing weight and what does it take for Black women to lose weight, and research has shown that we can do follow exact same eating plans, exercise, the whole 9 yards, and still not lose in the same ways that our counterparts, our white counterparts, might do. And one of the theories has to do with this stress and the fact and how stress can in fact change our metabolism, can affect how we process everything in our lives. And that I do believe has some effect on our ability to be self-care. Can you give us some hints, some suggestions as to how we can overcome that, some self-care kind of tips? Tara, I know that you and Michelle both have some really great routines. How do we start to go about that?
Let's see. One thing, can you hear me?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. One thing that I do is to make sure I'm a runner. And it seems like when I get out and I run, and it's something that I can do by myself, I'm not competing with anyone. It's a great stress reliever for me just to do that. And so I try to make sure that I do that at least 3 to 4 times a week. And then I don't feel as guilty when I get off the path of not eating right. But I think one of the things that we have to consider also that sometimes eating right, the right food, can be expensive for some folks. And I think we need to take that into consideration also. Some folks just can't afford to eat the best foods to stay on track. But what I do is I try to run, eat right, and have a glass of wine every night.
Okay. Amen to the wine every night. Michelle.
Yes. I agree with Tara, what she said, but some of the things that I do, I think nutrition is important because you have to feed your body and feed your cells. And if you're not, your immune system is in your gut. And if you're not feeding your body good food and nutrition, that in and of itself is going to weaken you and you're not going to be able to hold up in a stressful situation. I meditate daily. I do a lot of gratitude meditations, and it's important to do that because with all the negativity around you, you have to look at what is going for me that's good, what's happening in my life and in the world that's positive. I do yoga every day. Just do mindfulness work, just make sure, and also it's important to stay connected, as I said, to other people. To speak to what Tara said about food, eating nutritionally food can be expensive, but eating poorly is also expensive. And so if you pay now, you pay later. So you're going to pay with poor health. And I think that when you look at eating poor food, like fast foods, you're not eating nutritionally, and you'll be spending a lot of money. If you think about you eating out every day, you're spending a lot of money, as opposed to you buying foods and cooking. You might be able to eat over several days or maybe over several weeks. So I think that that's kind of a misunderstanding. Some people think that it's not, because think about it. If you're eating healthy, then you're kind of crowding out the negative foods. So if you're eating, right, greens and fruits and those kinds of things, then you're not buying the fast foods. You're not buying that. So you're saving money by not buying that, and you're spending the money on the good stuff. So I think that you're worth it. I think we're worth it. We're worth it to feed ourselves healthy and living live foods. So that's what keeps me going.
I agree. I think that we do have to make that commitment. But what about here in Oklahoma City recently in the last year, in the northeast part of Oklahoma City, we have existed in what we call a food desert. The major grocery store that serviced the black population in Oklahoma City just up and went away, and left an entire population of citizens here in Oklahoma City without an ability to have a grocery store that had fresh fruits and vegetables and all of those things that you were referring to, Michelle, that do make a difference. And while things have somewhat started to change, there's been some commitments to bring in some grocery stores, and there's even been a small kind of grocery store that opened up recently, which is very nice and certainly has all of those things. But how do those individuals that lived within walking distance to a certain degree, who have problems with transportation and understanding how to navigate where to find those kind of food products, how do they go about it? How do they change that dynamic? What do they do to try to help them in this kind of situation where there's a food desert?
Right. I think a lot of that is, oh, go ahead.
Go on.
Okay, I think a lot of that is political, and maybe they may have to put pressure on some of their local representatives to bring back some of those stores. And also what's happening now, is becoming more popular, is community gardening. And you have communities kind of getting together, and they're creating gardens that they can thrive off of. So I think that that's an alternative as well. But yeah, it's a major problem. It's just a problem in general. But I agree, that's a downside. But for those of us, who do have access to fresh foods, I think that we need to take advantage of that.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. So let's continue our conversation, talking a little bit again about that subject of COVID and the crisis that presented itself when we did go into lockdown and all the ramifications. There was an executive summary from the Urban League in 2020 in their report on Black America, and it was a statement in there that I think explains it all. It says, America caught the coronavirus and Black America caught hell. Many believe that the pandemic, of course, exposed this bleak picture that exists in America, where people of color, Black, Latina, Indigenous people, were the ones getting sick, were the ones dying in the higher numbers. So the ongoing research, which is looking into this phenomenon and trying to define what are the parameters that cause it to exist, and correcting this bias perhaps in healthcare. What are some of the other things that Black people in general need to consider about taking control of their health, taking control of their understanding of the healthcare system, and how it does disappoint us in making sure that we have the coverage and we have the care that we need? What do we need to do as women, as mothers, to ensure that dynamic changes? And I'm putting that out there for anyone.
I would really like to speak to that. I have learned that I cannot depend on the medical system to take care of me. I've got to be my own advocate. I've got to pay attention to what is being done and what is said. And I've got to be the one that say, hey, wait a minute, I'm not taking that. Or I'm not going to do that. Or even down to little things. For example, a couple of weeks ago, I've had heart surgery. And I realized that even taking the water pills that the doctor, gave to me, my ankles were still swelling. And, and I'm exercising and I'm doing all of the, I had to stop and say to myself, okay, what is causing this? And I started looking at the labels on foods. I didn't realize that in everything there's salt.
Yes.
And when the doctor said, well, you just need to limit your salt intake, and that's all he said. He didn't bother to tell me everything you eat, regardless of whether or not you put salt in it, has salt. So you need to pay attention to everything that you eat and measure how much salt is in it in order to keep your salt intake at a certain level. So it's things like that. We've got to say to ourselves, what is it I need to do in order to make sure my health is cared for in the way that it should be cared for? And unless we do that, we wind up most of the time on the losing end.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I agree with that. What you say, I think that it's important for us to take care of ourselves first, but in our relationship with the healthcare industry, we need to have a partnership with our doctors as opposed to the doctors being God. We need to come in and because we know our bodies better than anybody does. So we need to pay close attention to our bodies, go to the doctor when we need to, and question the doctor. If the doctor recommends something, well, hey, I don't know, I need to check with someone else, but we have to take control. We have to take control. And I think it's important also to read labels. I'm a label reader. When I go in the store, I don't care where I am. I've been told that I take forever in the store, but I'm going to read labels and I'm going to look at the sugar content, the salt content, sodium content, and everything else in there and what else is in there, because a lot of things are hidden and a lot of things are disguised. And sometimes what we are told by the commercials that is health food is not. It's fake food, it's Frankenfood. And so we need to look at it and we need to read the labels. And we need to basically educate ourselves in the area of what we're eating in nutrition.
I agree. I think that nutrition is key. When you talk about the food desert, that's warfare to remove food from a community. In war, you put up a supply line, right? That's warfare. So it lets us know we have to control our food. And it's not enough to just politically get the supermarkets to come back into your community. If they don't want to be there, what food are they going to have?
Right. Yeah, right. True.
So to what Ms. Gladys was talking about, looking at labels, there are beans and other canned goods that have no salt added, but it's not in your community. So I think it's, being a partner with your doctor, eating as well as you can with what your pocketbook can afford. But I also think it's going back and talking to our parents and grandparents, if they're still alive, finding out what were the remedies that you used to do? What did you do when you didn't go to the doctor, when you weren't allowed to go to a doctor, or when the doctor wasn't licensed because he was Black? What did you do?
I also think that checking into these food banks that are operating in our communities as a substitute for our shopping and at our leisure, or being able to select the kinds of foods that we want to eat. If we get anything from the food bank, and what I'm always told, well, just imagine what they would have if we didn't have the food bank. Well, a lot of times when we look at the contents of what comes in a box from the food bank, once you open a can, if it's not green on the inside, you want to look at the date, you want to look at the contents, what they're serving. So most of the things, if we consume them at face value, will lead to obesity, will lead to high blood pressure, will have a negative effect on our overall health health and well-being. And so I think that's another area that we need to really look at and say, okay, if you have a food bank existing anywhere near you and they're sending food out into our communities, again, 1 or 2 packages of tomatoes will not count as a healthy food delivery for us, or a healthy source where we can get good food for them. So I think that's another place we need to look at in terms of overall health and well-being for people in our community. And as for being a Black woman going into an office, that's a doctor's office, my biggest challenge is being heard. And you think, well, that's not possible. You seem to be pretty loud. But yet, first, I can tell you what they're going to ask me. Are you a diabetic? Do you have high blood pressure? I mean, I mean, just go down the list and they're done. Doesn't matter. My arm could be on fire and it won't matter because they have an agenda. And that's the thing that we need to learn to fight as well.
And I just want to say, because you started with this conversation with the question around COVID. And one of the things that I immediately responded to when COVID, the very beginning days, was almost immediately at a certain point in the US, they started saying it was a disease that was affecting people, minorities. And they just, the news media and their desire to put certain propaganda out there, made this almost a Black disease. At a certain point, they were saying the number of minorities and people dying at a higher rate. It very much aggravated me because, again, this is a global disease, and they wanted to, in the media, and I think it's one of the reasons America just went the wrong direction, is because they had propaganda that wanted to make this something around minorities, people of color, as opposed to a global pandemic. And so a lot of the initial stories focused on how it was harming us, which I think made other communities of people say, oh, okay, I don't have to worry about it, which is the same mess we continue to be in, because it's a lot of those folks who wouldn't put masks on and put the people of color who have to go out, work, drive buses, be the grocery store person, they put us in jeopardy. And so I was very upset of how the propaganda of this disease initially came into America. And of course, once, they saw, everybody was dying. It wasn't really one particular minority. And even if it was higher amongst us, the thing that upset me so much is that, well, did you ever explain why? It's a reason, because we have to go to work. And so to me, the whole thing about us as Black women, as it relates to this society and us as, people of color, is just, until we can get the media to not put propaganda, because I know somebody wrote in there, it's true, it's everything, even about food deserts. They want to tell all this stuff, but we never get to points of why that is.
I have to agree with you. That was one of the confounding kind of issues that I had when it first began, as to, why. My question in my mind was, why was people of color? Why were we being affected? And I don't think we still haven't gotten the answers. And I'm hoping that at some point in time we will get a better understanding. I want to change gears just a little bit. This whole pandemic and the racial strife that has come kind of almost as a result of kind of the pent-up anger that exists in our country. But we are kind of coming into a recovery phase. We are, to a certain degree, trying to move back. At least we're seeing some efforts to kind of overcome all of the negativity that happened in the last year. And one of the things that we know is true is that, we had this absence from the federal level, of guidance as to how things should go, how things should be. And one of the things that we've seen is that mayors in state governments have been driving a lot of the things that are bringing us towards recovery. In particular, we have a number of Black women who are mayors in major cities, from Lori Lightfoot in Chicago to Keisha Lance Bottoms to Kim Janey in Boston. There's a number of, not nearly enough, but there's a number of Black women who are currently starting to help with this recovery. Ms. Vanita, I know that your story lends me to kind of applaud your influence on Black women and their inroads into the political environment. What would you advise the president? What would you advise Vice President Harris and all these Black women mayors on what the issues of color, of people of color, what they are and how you would suggest that they start to tackle them?
First of all, I would suggest that she talk to the members of her sorority who identify as always having been Black. And I think there's some common sense kinds of things that we have done that I know about from when I was a child to now. In dealing with the medical issue, one of the issues that I have is that my primary care doctor is probably a late 30, early 40-year-old Anglo female. She doesn't listen. And since she's supposed to be the overseer of my health care, she can't respond to questions well. In terms of the vaccine, I, like everybody else, had problems understanding what this vaccine was about. And when she was pushing me to get the vaccine, I told her I wouldn't take it until Black doctors recommended it. And after the NAACP had a Zoom conference, and there were quite a few Black doctors on, and I finally was able to feel like I could go ahead and do it. I could trust it. I have a grandson who is who's 30, who's talking about the Tuskegee Experiment and why he's not going to take the vaccine. Now, word is passing among the young people like crazy. And he says he doesn't want to be a zombie, so he's not going to take it. My comment to him was that it was better to be a zombie than be dead. So, hopefully we'll get him there. The other thing is that what we don't really want to call racism has never gone away in this country.
Right.
The discussions that are going on now through the media and uninformed people about this small amount of money being given to families monthly, and that's why people aren't going to work. That isn't true.
That's crazy.
People aren't going to work because they have a lot of other issues. Who's going to take care of my kids while I'm gone? Where is this $300? I know this $300 is not comparable to what I could earn, but by the time I pay my expenses, find somebody to do childcare, pay for transportation, I'm not making much more than $300. So I think we are not helpless people, and we need to quit acting like we are. We need to stop. I learned a long time ago that everything you read in the newspaper isn't the truth. We need to remember that. We need to sort of assist in whatever way we can with those we see who need some help. I mean, here, several of the churches are doing food distributions, and a lot of them are doing meats and fresh vegetables. You know, so there are people out there trying to do some things, and we need to sort of participate or encourage others to be a part of that. Now, I know that doesn't go to Vice President Harris, but I think, you know, it's time for us to stop expecting other people to do something. It's time for us to step to the forefront and do what we can to help.
Very well said. Anyone else?
I'd be curious to hear a young person's perspective. Annette?
Yeah, so I actually agree with, I think Gladys brought it up a few questions back about being your own advocate. That's so important. As African-American women, we are doctors, social workers, police officers, because we have to do all that for ourselves and not expect other people to do it for us. There are just so many aspects of my life. Like, I'm a bit younger than you guys, but much has not changed, unfortunately. And it is sometimes sad to hear that. Of course, there has been progress, but I work in Brooklyn, and gentrification is wild in Brooklyn. And I work in East New York, where you cannot go 4 blocks without seeing 6 church chickens. But guess what you don't see? You don't see a Trader Joe's, you don't see a grocery store. None of that exists here. And we run so many programs. I'm a librarian at the public library. We actually have a garden and a park where we grow vegetables, and we try and tell people, they think it's so expensive to eat healthy. And they have this perception, if I buy 1 meal for my family, that's $25, that feeds them one night, that's worth more than going to the grocery store, spending $25 to get 4 meals. So there's a lack of education, there's a lack of sources. And unfortunately, you know, we go to our congressmen, we go to people, but sometimes it's grassroots that get these things done. If enough people get together and they're angry at this, why don't we have grocery stores? Why don't we have this? Like, that's the voice you need, because it puts pressure on people that have the power to do something. Because I feel like I learned a long time ago, especially working in a public library that is paid for by city taxes, that you can't rely on your city officials. The only thing you can rely on is putting pressure on them to the point where your community is now outraged and they say, okay, let me come in and see what's going on, then I can do that. So there's such the great thing about my generation, millennials and Gen Z, is that, like, they're so vocal, and sometimes it makes people, they're so vocal to the point where people are uncomfortable. And when someone's uncomfortable, things get done. And I think that's the biggest part, is like using your voice and doing it in a way, you know, sometimes you become, there's this persona of being the angry Black woman. Really, you just want equality. Like, you're not being angry, you're saying, I have something that's, you know, other people don't have, and that's not fair. And, you know, getting over those stereotypes. I think stereotypes is one of the topics we might talk about later that are so harmful. There's just so many. I feel like I can go on and on. All these topics connect in some way. But yeah, that's like what I think in that topic.
Well, that's a great point of view, and we need more of that. We need more millennials and Generation Zs and involved in these conversations, because ultimately you are the ones that are going to have to carry it on. Let me move on to, you know, one of the other issues, I guess, big issues, has to do with Black Lives Matter and that movement and the protests that have come out of it, and all of the angst that people across the nation that are not people of color seems to have with those marches and those movements. June and Gladys in particular, but all of you ladies have probably in the past. But June, I know a lot of your stories goes back to your days as a student protester and advocate. How do you see what do you see as the differences in the movement that you were surrounded by, that you were so deeply involved in, and the movement today? What are the differences, and what kind of suggestions, what kind of insights can you provide to this generation of protesters that may make a difference in their success and how they go forward?
Unmute.
Unmute.
Somebody muted me, huh? Let me start off by saying that I am glad to see the young people hit the streets. I've been thinking they should have done it years ago. I've been waiting for them to understand that the revolution that we started should never have ended because everything was not done. Lots of things were not done. I think the biggest change in what we see now is the fact of social media. I don't think people are any less angry or more angry now than they were in the 60s. You just didn't have a cell phone where you could turn it on and you could tape all these things and people could see immediately. You didn't have to, you had to wait for the newspaper to print it. Well, you were waiting for somebody white to print your news and what you had done. So it could be days before they heard it, or they may never have heard it. So I think the temperature of the country would have been as high as I see it now, back in the 60s, had we had the same social media that we have now. It has, but also what the social media has done is it has ginned up on the opposite side of information for us to have. It has ginned up a lot of hatred and negativity on the other side. If I guarantee you, if white folks in Birmingham, Alabama had seen what was going on in their town, in the same kind of happening way that they see things happening now, wherever it is, they would have been up in arms as much as people are up in arms now. I don't see the Black Lives Matter any different from Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And they're trying to paint them as more like a Black Panther kind of group, and they're not. In fact, they've painted Black Panthers with a brush that's a little more evil than they should have. They did a lot of good things in the community and took care of things that you're talking about now, feeding people and that kind of thing. So they had a civic background to them as well as everything else. And if some of us had done what we did things in the 60s that they let white folks get away with now. If we had been at the Capitol, and if Black Lives Matter had been at the Capitol, you would have seen an entirely different reaction from everybody.
Oh, absolutely.
The acting assistant secretary of defense, last name Carter, is an interesting character for me because he grew up in Iowa City, Iowa with my son, and they played football together. And he is just, and his father was the police chief in Iowa City. He was a nice police chief. And I didn't know Chris at all because he wasn't a leader at the high school. So I didn't really know him, but my son did. And he just came out and said he got a communication from Trump telling him to be nice, to tell everybody that the Secretary of Defense has a whole lot to say about what was going to happen at the Capitol, to be nice to the protesters. Wow. To be nice to the protesters in writing. Now, if he had thought that a Black Lives Matter group was coming, would he have wanted to be nice? Of course not. Of course not. We're living here in Missouri with Josh Hawley, who was one of our senators, who was the one that raised his fist outside the Capitol on January 6th. Like, go boys, rah, 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 you. I don't see it as different at all, except in, like I said, the social media has caused it to appear to be different. And so this looks more active, it looks more proactive, let's say, than what happened back in the 60s. We didn't get a lot of results then, but Annette is right. People gotta be uncomfortable. They gotta feel uncomfortable. They won't get anything done. As long as Black Lives Matters or somebody stays on the streets and makes them uncomfortable, just look at what they're trying to do now. Whether it's gonna do anything of value, I don't know. But every corporation in the country now is adding these new positions that are dealing with inclusion. Has become one of the new pass the word. I mean, one of the new jazzy words now that everybody's got to have a, Wynell knows it's better
D&I.
than. Yes.
Yes.
And everybody,
Diversity and
that's right, diversity and inclusion. And whether it's gonna, I don't care about them having diversity and inclusion. What I want to see is what kind of results are we gonna get out of this? And only time will tell about that. Now, what we got out of the 60s was something that we called affirmative action. White folks didn't like that at all. I was director of affirmative action at the University of Iowa for a short period of time. And people were just evil about it. They weren't even nicer than they are now. So I don't really see any real differences right now. I think this is a long time in coming. I think we need to keep the pressure on. We need to get more people elected to office. We need to start at the local level, because you can't start off being the president of the United States, although Obama almost did that, but not quite. But we need to start with the school boards. We need to start with the mayors. We have a young, very dynamic Black mayor here in Kansas City. And people have called me from all over the country who have seen him on television praising. And they haven't just been Black people, they've been white people. Because I lived in Iowa for 30 years. So I lived in a white community. My whole working career was in a white community. If I sneezed across town, somebody offered.
I want to kind of piggyback on that. There's so many things that I'm going to try to change it just a little bit, because we're kind of coming to the close, and I really want to get your thoughts, all of you ladies. I want to get your thoughts on just a number of things. One of the things that I was reading about while I was trying to do some research, is the fact that you may all be familiar with Jane Elliott. She's a American diversity educator, and she has a lot of interesting concepts and examples of how to change and break this cycle of racism. But one of the things that I read that she said I thought was interesting was that white men choose to be brave, but Black women have to be brave every day. And that kind of brought me back to when I was teaching diversity, diversity and resiliency, more to the point, but how to become more resilient. And we know that that's one of the things that we have had to rely on. But I would ask folks, just what is your superpower? We all have a superpower, and sometimes we're not even all that familiar with it. But Andrea, your story really kind of reflects, the fact that you've been using your superpower for a long time. What is your superpower? How would you define it?
Actually, as I've said earlier before, it's my faith. I can't just put my trust or depend on man in my power. I have to just stand on my faith and know that there are certain people God sent in my life to direct me in the path I should go. Now I have the responsibility, as we have heard a lot of speakers said today, the responsibility is on me to accept the help or continue living that rough, fine line with no positive outcome. And so if I stayed in my faith and see the person, not everybody who came in my life meant me good, but I gave most of the people an opportunity to prove themselves to me, to prove that they're here for me and they're going to help me along the way. Now, them helping me along the way doesn't mean they're going to make everything right or everything is going to be well. I have some work to do also, and them coming along is leading me in a more perfect line than when I was traveling by myself. Because for my situation, most of the people that I should be able to depend on cause me more harm than good.
Thank you. Tara, what's your superpower?
It's to choose my battles. Choose my battles with my family, with friends, in the workplace. Choose my battles and know that everything that happens in my life that I may not agree with it's not always worth the battle.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Miss Vanita, tell us about your superpower.
I don't really know that I have a superpower, but it's almost like a principle that I learned when I was a little girl from my grandmother, and I was an oldest child also. And her thing was always in how we dealt with people, and it was the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Along the way, I found this little sheet of paper that a kid had dropped on the way to school or home from school, and must have been about a second grader because it was a house and clouds and trees and so forth. And somebody had written for him a statement of his. Johnny drew a monster, the monster chased him. Just in time, Johnny erased him. So that's where I got my eraser.
I love it. I love it.
Chose not to deal with stupid stuff.
Ms. Gladys, your superpower.
My superpower is the ability to not get angry. I get angry. Sometimes I don't think rationally. My superpower is to put on the back burner judgment and give a person the opportunity to show me who you are before I determine who you are based on what you look like.
I can see that, yeah. Marilyn, what's your superpower?
I would have to say communicator, being able to communicate and to make known not just what I think and feel or believe about any particular thing, but to invest or to communicate what others may be thinking and feeling, because I think that's important. Everyone has a story and has something to say. And it's not about the disagreeing parts, but it's about the parts where we can coalesce and come together and say, oh, wow, I had no idea that you people did that or thought that. You know, you can hear people say that, and then I'm able to come in and connect and hold my peace and, well, you know, like, let's not blow up the situation, but how can we come together and say, all right, my God, I didn't know that. I didn't recognize that about myself. I didn't realize that I was that way or thinking that way. So I think communication, being well-read, well-versed, those kinds of things I love to do and invest in. And I think that's a gift that I have. And I try to utilize it as best I can.
Wonderful. Michelle. Is Michelle still?
Yes. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay. Yes.
I can hear you.
I agree with faith is mine, and also the ability to see the glass half full and not half empty, and being able to see the good in all things, and just, you know, trying to lead in love and just being positive. Even though you see the negativity around you, you also can always see the flowers. So I'm not trying to be naive, because I do see the negative, but I also know that the positive is there, and I like to look at that and focus on that. That makes me happy.
Wonderful. June, what's your superpower?
Well, I don't know if you call it a superpower or not, but I have found out about myself that from the time I was very small, growing up in Jacksonville, Florida, with lots and lots of racism, where the cops would come past my house when I was this little fair-skinned girl with blonde hair out in the yard and yell racial epithets at me, that I learned not to be afraid. I don't think anybody frightens me. When Stephanie first did the book and she came here for book signing, one of the questions asked here was, June, were you ever afraid? Never was I afraid. I seem to have a lack of fear, and that forces me to move forward always. And it throws everybody else off balance, totally, particularly white folks. They're totally off balance because I show no fear in my face nor my actions. And I will always give as good as anybody that's going to try to give me. And so that, I think that has been what has stood me in great stead through the years in the world in which I have had to live in, which has been mostly a hostile world since I left college. Being in the white world all of these years, it's hostile. And
Yes.
I'm just not afraid of them. And so therefore, I don't behave as if I'm afraid. So I'm always moving forward and being positive, and that just throws them for a loop and they don't know what to do with me. And I'm happy about that.
That makes me happy to hear.
Very
JC.
Well, I think just as Ms. June has said, because it's a hostile world, my superpower is helping others develop their skills and not feeling that I'm in competition with them. So, for example, I meet with some other writers and supporting them, and I'm a writer too. I'm not in competition. And I think that we as Black women always have to remember that we're not in competition. We are one, even though we may be different ages, come from different areas, but we are one. And we stand together and we help each other. And for me, that's what gives me the greatest satisfaction.
Well, thank you all. I am going to turn it over to one of my superpowers. That would be Sister Stephanie. And have her kind of solicit some conversation from the audience, or however she'd like to. I think she was probably about ready to tell me that my time was up.
Not really. You didn't ask two people about their superpowers, and so I'm going to ask them myself. Annette, what's your superpower?
I think my superpower, I guess being seen. I have a kind of personality where wherever I go, I think people notice me. And I try and use that to my advantage, and that's in being educated and on topics I want to talk about, because if people are going to listen to me, I want to give them the right information. And I also want to be a voice for people. Like I mentioned, I'm a librarian, so I'm constantly having to, people who don't feel like they have a voice or a say in the community, like I don't mind being that person for them. And if I'm going to be noticed, I'd rather, be for a good reason. So I think that's my superpower.
Joy, what's your superpower? Joy, unmute yourself.
Okay, sorry. I'm on mute. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Mine is listening. In my career, it's the thing that helps me every day. What I learned and what I know about people, and what I've even learned today, is people want to be able to talk and get everything out that they have to say. And when they believe you're listening to them, you have some opportunity to resolve issues and move forward. And one of the things I think that we've lacked as a people is people just listening to us. A lot of people say a lot of things that women, people of color want. You need to listen to us and hear what we say. Because what I found in my career is when I listened to people, they could go on, sometimes ad nauseum, but when they finished and I said, so what do you want me to do? Many times they would reflect and say, well, I guess I put myself in this situation and it's not a lot you probably can do for me. But it was that I let them talk until they got it out. And also, even today, there's pearls of wisdom when you listen to people. Sometimes people seem to be going out, but there's something that'll come that says, wow, that's good. And it's so much learning that I've gotten from just being able to sit back and listen to people. So that's my superpower, but I have to say, in combination with that, it's my faith.
Mm-hmm. And finally, Winnell, what's your superpower?
The fact that I can ask other people about theirs.
You're bailing on us, Winnell. You're bailing on us. Is that all you gonna say?
In the stone.
Slick one, L. That's slick.
Okay, so is that all? Oh, so she muted herself. So now I know we only have a few minutes scheduled left. We have some time, but I would love to hear comments, questions from the audience who has joined us today about anything that we talked about, anything you heard, and anything you have to say. There's some great comments in the chat room, and so I appreciate those, but I would encourage any of you all, and maybe we should just unmute everybody. No, we don't have to. I guess when you want to talk, you will, but what comments can I get from the audience who has joined us today?
Well, my name is, as you can see up there, my name is Myra Jackson. I was invited to come to this chat by May16 Miller. We're graduates of Douglas High School's class of '69. And we've been together for over 50 years. And we just finished an event here recently where we did a scholarship fundraiser. And she sent out an invitation to the committee and to come and a committee of ladies. And there was a few gentlemen to come and join your chat today. And it was really something. I had read it earlier and I had kind of dismissed it. But early at about midnight or 12:30 last night, I felt prompted to go to that email again and accept the invitation that Catherine had sent out. And I am so glad that I did. And it's been a very wonderful experience to be with you ladies on this chat today. If I may address that superpower, I agree with a number of you who said that, especially Andrea, who stood that out to say that her superpower was her faith. And I have to agree with that, because that faith in knowing who I'm connected with and who my human spirit is connected with in the inside of me as the Holy Spirit causes me to know how to stand in my superpower, because I know that the word of God tells me that greater is he that is in me than he that is in the world. And if I will connect my humanness with the Holy Spirit that is within me and lean not to my understanding, but lean to the understanding that is within the Holy Spirit that my human spirit is connected to, then I can have that confidence, as June Davis has, that I need not fear, because fear causes torment. And if I fear, then I'm going to be in torment and then I'm going to shrink back. But if I know that my human spirit is connected to the greater power of the creator of all heaven and earth, who has chosen to live inside of me and who has chosen to be with me, Jesus said he went away and he would send the comforter who would be in me and who would be with me. My faith, believing that and doubting not in my heart, I will see a performance of that belief that I have. So I am so grateful to be here today with you. Let me share just one other thing with you. Just today, just being with you here, something came to me, and I went to my service today, church service today before I came. And when you started out this meeting, I got up and I went and got these notes that I took today from the sermon that was given. And if I may just share those with you, it says, I'm under the culture of Jesus Christ. You must know who you are, because someone is always trying to define you. The power of the past will try and disturb the power of your future. The power of the gospel is that you do not have to identify yourself with your worst moment. And then God is always calling out the very best in you if we let him. And then all the power of Jesus Christ, God's Son, belongs to me because of the covenant. Now, do I believe that is the thing? Do I believe what I read in the Gospels? Do I believe this book that is older than any other book?
Miss Jackson, I'm gonna have to stop you because I do want to, and I appreciate everything you've said, but I do want to give anybody else who has comments as we're winding this up or questions to give them an opportunity to speak. So thank you so much for your comment.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, other comments or questions or reflections on what we've done today?
Beverly?
Yes.
I thought it was good. I thought it was an interesting conversation. And I love the historical, like looking at what happened in the 60s versus what's happening now, because you don't really realize how much history repeats itself, you know, but how it morphs. So I thought it was very interesting.
Beverly?
Okay, that is my one important comment all day.
Every comment is important, just so everybody knows. Every comment is important. I see two unmuted people, Robert and Beverly. Beverly?
Okay. Yeah, I enjoyed it. I thought it was good. I like to hear some outcomes, some actions, things that we can actually do as a result of some of the things that we discussed. We talked about Black Lives Matter. I had a few comments about that, but I won't say anything about that right now. But I thought it was good. I think that we need to be diligent. I think that we need to be woke people. And if we haven't been woke by now, I don't know if we're going to ever get woke. My superpower is Christ, the hope of glory, who lives in me. And knowing that I know that God is a God of righteousness and justice, and that's the foundation of his throne. And I know some way, somehow, whether it's in my lifetime or someone else's lifetime, God is a God of justice, and justice will prevail. I think that we need to continue to press as African-American women, pressing towards that mark of the high calling of God that's on each and every one of our lives. And knowing that we have been born into this season and this time. Acts 17, 26 and 27 says that God determined the exact place and times that we should live, and doing all that we know to do to make life better, not just for ourselves. We really need to know that at our age now, we need to be working for future generations, not things that's going to benefit me, but what's going to benefit our young people and give them a ladder to climb up on, give them a bridge to cross over. And thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Beverly. Mr. Cushney, the apparently lone male in our group, please, you have the floor.
Well, I'm not afraid to be the only male or only Black person or whatever I am in many of the situations I find myself in or I decide to get involved in. And I just appreciate being able to hear the perspectives unfiltered from a number of my sisters who have been out there fighting the good fight. And want to commend you all, and commend you in particular, Stefana, for pulling this all together, writing the books, encouraging me to get on my book. And just have enjoyed being able to share in these discussions, the previous ones, as well as this one today. Well, listening to them, because I'm not participating most of the time. But I guess just by listening and learning and getting some additional understanding of a variety of perspectives has been interesting and helpful in growing. So thank you all. And thank you in particular, Stefana.
I was gonna say, Robert usually knows how to pronounce my name, but somehow that Stefana came out, and I'm not gonna be mad at you. It's all right. By the way, Robert and I at some point in the near future are planning on a podcast ourselves, just so you know. So, and I'm saying that as much to put it out there so that he and I will do something sooner than later. But thank you so much, Robert. Other comments, this has been, from my perspective, what I hoped it would be. What I also hope is that we will continue to do these. Everybody didn't perhaps get to say, Beverly mentioned, there are lots of other things, and certainly this was not intended to be a conversation where we cover everything, we cover the spectrum of topics, but I must applaud and defer to Dr. Neese for being able to generate the kind of conversation that we've had. Because that's what she does, she's good at it. And when I asked her, she immediately said yes. I encourage you all, if you have suggestions about other, if you want to continue these conversations, to let us know. I did put my email and our website on in chat. Please contact me about any discussions, those you want to join, different topics that you may have. And right now I'm kind of rambling, which is what my sisters accused me of, but I just really appreciate this and hope that, as Beverly said as well, we need one. At the end of the day, I want us to find action items. I want us to find ways. So this is a beginning conversation that I hope will continue over time, and we can get to the point where we find action items, we find things that we can do. I very much appreciate the input of our youngest member, and I don't mean it that any way other than that she is our youngest member, Annette, because I do think we have to all work together. There's wisdom we can pass on, and they need to take up the torch. So I guess that's kind of all I have to say. Are there any other comments or questions or anything anybody else has to say? I'll have 1 minute for that to happen, and then we're gonna say goodbye.
Thank you, sister, for just doing this. I think that your desire to write the books, to pull us together, is incredible. And you have to have a desire to get something done, and you did, and you have, and I appreciate you for it.
That's my superpower, my family and friends. Okay, that's my superpower. Thank you all. Have a great Sunday. Stay safe, stay strong. Do what you have to do to protect yourselves and for us to continue moving forward. Peace, everybody. Take good care.